They said only a fool would build a home out there, where the dirt cracked open like old scars, and even the wind seemed too tired to care. But every morning, Elias Turner saw her. A thin woman in a faded coat, lifting timber one plank at a time, as if daring the desert itself to stop her. The wind swept through Red Rock Creek, carrying the hammer's ring, the clang of nails, and the soft, stubborn sound of life trying to begin again. From behind the mesquite ridge, Elias watched in silence. His horse barely breathed, as though it too understood this was something sacred, something a man shouldn't interrupt. Before him stood Nora Lane, hair tied in haste, arms bare, skin burned bronze by the sun. No family, no husband, no blessing from the town, only calloused hands, and a will carved deep into the earth like a knife against stone. Elias closed his eyes, and in the howl of the wind, he heard something else. Ruth's laughter, light and distant, from the years before blood and gunfire took it all away. He hadn't spoken to a living soul in nearly 2 years. But that day, as the western sky bled red and the dust storm began to rise, he felt something shift inside him, something restless, reckless, human. And for the first time since the war ended, Elias Turner nudged his horse forward and rode down into the valley. The sandstorm came quick, like a breath swallowed by the earth itself. The sky turned from rust red to ashen gray, and the wind sliced at bare skin like a whip. From the ridge, Elias watched Nora's wooden frame shudder in the gale, the skeleton of a dream about to collapse. She fought to tie down the canvas, hands shaking, eyes half shut against the grit, but every gust tore away another piece of her hope. Elias spurred his horse downhill, sand filling his mouth, burning his throat. By the time she turned, he was already there, face half hidden behind a dust-stained scarf, eyes carved deep as the desert rock. Without a word, he tossed her a coil of rope and dropped to one knee, driving stakes into the ground. In that roaring storm, they didn't need words, only rope, wood, and the stubborn strength of 2 people who refused to break. When the wind finally eased, Nora sank to the ground, hair tangled with sweat and dust. Elias pulled off his scarf. Beneath it, his face was weathered, worn, but kind. "You helping me out of pity?" she rasped. He shook his head. "No, because I know what it's like to lose everything." She went quiet. The wind softened, carrying a hint of something fragile, understanding. He tipped his hat and turned to leave, but she called after him. "You any good at framing?" "Good enough to keep it from falling on me." "Then be here tomorrow. I can't finish this part alone." The next morning, Elias returned, an old hammer in one hand, 2 pairs of leather gloves in the other. No one in town saw them working. Only the dry creek and the wind could bear witness. He showed her how to set the joints, how to read the grain before driving the chisel. She showed him how to be silent without turning to stone. At noon, they shared cornbread in the shade of the half-built cabin. Nora spoke quietly about Ben, her husband, killed in a miner's brawl. After that, no one in town wanted her around. Elias didn't ask for more. A man who's buried his family doesn't need details to understand loss. They kept building. Each strike of the hammer sounded like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. Sometimes she laughed, softly, unexpectedly. And it startled him, because it sounded almost like Ruth's laughter, the one he'd buried 2 years ago. When the sun set, they sat beside the fire, orange light dancing on their calloused hands. "You ever built a home before?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I've only ever torn them down, She studied him for a moment, no judgment in her gaze. Then maybe it's time you learned. Elias looked up. The sky was bleeding red across the horizon, carrying the scent of pine sap and old ash. And in that dusk, Elias Turner, the man who'd buried his heart long ago, felt something rise inside him again, thin as smoke, light as hope. From that day forward, he came every morning and stayed till the moon climbed high. No promises, no declarations, only wood, sweat, and silence that no longer felt lonely. On the last night of the month, Nora spoke softly into the dark. If anyone asks why I built my home here, I'll tell them, because someone believed I could. Elias said nothing. He just set one more beam into place, drove the nail firm, and whispered to himself, "And because of you, I remembered how to live." The dry season came, and with it, the whispers. From May Cunningham's store to the bar at the Silver Spur, people murmured, "Nora Lane's living with that Turner fella? The bounty hunter? The one who used to kill for gold, now swinging a hammer?" In Red Rock, rumor spread faster than dust, and malice didn't need proof. A woman doing a man's work, building a cabin, living alone, with a man visiting every dawn. That was enough to make her a sinner. Nora knew. Elias knew. But they kept on working anyway, driving each nail like a quiet answer to the world's noise. That night, while the fire cracked between them, Nora said softly, "They won't let this go." Elias shrugged. They never do, when something's worth keeping. She almost smiled. For a moment, her eyes in the firelight made him believe silence might be enough. But it wasn't. A week later, Reverend Boone knocked at their cabin. He held a weathered Bible, his eyes heavy with what he didn't dare say. "Miss Lane, Mr. Turner, folks are talking. I just pray you'll keep your distance, for the sake of your souls." Elias only nodded. No promise, no denial. When the preacher left, Nora stared at him for a long time. "You won't say anything?" "There's nothing to say. We know the truth." "Sometimes," she whispered, voice trembling, "silence is a lie." That was the first crack. He didn't come the next morning, or the one after. When he finally returned, the sky was dark and her face colder than the desert wind. "I heard the stories," she said, "that you hunted the Creed gang." He tightened his grip on the reins. "That's true." "And the man who burned your camp, killed your wife and boy, was Vernon Creed himself?" He said nothing. "Elias?" "Yes." His voice was low, rough. "John, and you know who kept him from the gallows?" He looked up, eyes sharp, wet. "A nurse, a woman named Nora Lane." The air froze. The fire between them hissed and died, leaving only the glow of buried embers. "I didn't know," she whispered, pale as ash. "I didn't know you were Ruth Turner's husband. I only did my duty." "And I lived, so I could bear what was left." He turned away. She wanted to call after him, but the sound of hooves swallowed her words. The wind rose, scattering the half-built walls as if the whole world had cracked with them. By morning, the rumors had mutated. The nurse who saved her husband's killer, now she's sleeping with him to pay for it. "No, I heard he's on the run, from the hangman this time." Words were cheap, and cheap words buried truth deeper than any grave. Nora walked into the church that Sunday, head held high. Every face turned, part disgust, part hunger for spectacle. Boone preached about purity, but no one heard mercy. In the back pew, Elias sat with his eyes on the floor, too ashamed to meet hers. When the sermon ended, Clara Whitmore, Vernon Creed's widow, stood up. Well, ain't that something? A woman who don't know her place, and a killer hiding behind her skirts. Laughter, dry as tumbleweed, filled the room. Nora didn't flinch. Elias clenched his fists, but said nothing. And in that brief silence, those few cowardly seconds, something between them shattered. She turned to him, voice steady but breaking. You chose silence, so I'll choose to leave. When her figure disappeared into the dust road, Elias felt every beam, every nail, every wall he'd built collapse inside his chest. That night, he drank alone in the stables, listening to the wind whistle through the cracks. He thought maybe Ruth had never truly left. Maybe he'd just never learned how to live without guilt. Through the haze of whiskey, he saw her again, not as a ghost, but as a memory. Elias, she whispered, smiling through the dust. I never needed you to die with me. I needed you to live right. He woke with tears and grit on his face, and outside Red Rock Creek held its breath, the wind heavy with the promise of another storm, not of sand, but of bullets and sins that still needed forgiving. Red Rock fell silent, the kind of silence that feels like ash in the throat. Since the day Nora walked out of the church, the town had swallowed her whole. No one spoke to her. No one bought her goods. No one came near the half-built cabin by the dry creek. Only wind and unfinished timber kept her company. One morning, as she carved a wooden joint, 3 riders appeared on the ridge. Leading them was Vernon Creed, black hat, thin smile, eyes cold as iron. He waved a paper in the air. This land's mine now. Copper veins run beneath it. You can leave or burn. Nora gripped the hammer tight. You don't have that right. Creed sneered. Lady, Red Rock stopped caring about rights a long time ago. He nodded. His men dismounted, tossing torches into the dry straw near her wall. Fire bloomed instantly, hungry, gold, and merciless. Nora raised her rifle and fired. The bullet tore Creed's hat clean off, left a whisper of smoke where it passed. He laughed. Crazy woman, he said. You'll burn with your pretty little dream. Meanwhile, Elias Turner sat half-drunk in a stable on the edge of town. Old Moses, the ranch hand, burst through the door and threw a scrap of paper at him. They're at her place, he barked. If there's still a man in you, get up. Elias stared at the gun hanging on the post, the one he'd sworn never to touch again. Sunlight glinted off its worn steel like a memory calling his name. He rose, wrapped his scarf around his face, and saddled his horse. But before he left, he stopped by the Red Rock Cemetery, where Ruth and their child slept beneath a crooked marker, a dried daisy bent in the wind. You told me to live honest, he murmured. Well, watch me now. Then he rode, across the blood-red hills, through choking dust, as if hell itself were chasing him to redemption. By the time he reached the cabin, it was half consumed by flame. Nora was coughing, firing, fighting smoke and men all at once. Creed turned, surprise flickering across his face. Turner, I figured you'd drown in whiskey by now. Elias's voice was gravel and fire. No. Today I came to bury a devil. 3 guns rose, thunder cracked. One outlaw dropped instantly. The second went down screaming, leg shattered. Creed dove behind a boulder and fired back, his bullet grazing Elias's shoulder, blood spreading through the cloth like rust. But Elias kept moving, step after step through smoke and dust, his breath ragged, his purpose clear. He saw Nora on her knees, trying to drag the burning tarp away from the wall. Get out! he shouted. "No!" she yelled back. "Then if the cabin falls, I lose everything." Elias charged through the fire, grabbed her arm, pulled hard. Then, one gunshot. A single brutal sound. The bullet hit him square in the chest, splintered through wood behind him. He staggered, but stayed upright long enough to shove her clear of the flames. Smoke curled around them. Firelight flickered in his eyes. For once, not haunted, not afraid, only alive. Creed stepped out, smirking, but before he could fire again, Nora reached for Elias's gun. She leveled it. One shot. Creed fell backward into the dust, eyes wide, still clutching the half-burned deed that had damned him. Elias sank to the porch steps, the same steps where they'd once shared cornbread at sunset. Nora caught him, her hands slick with blood. "Elias, don't you dare." He smiled faintly. "I've been gone too long. Now I'm home." "You don't understand," she sobbed. "I need you." He shook his head, voice fading to a whisper. "You don't need a man to build your home. You just need to believe you can. As for me," he closed his eyes. "I just needed to do one thing right." The wind rose, carrying sparks and resin and memory. Flames licked the cabin walls, but the frame held. Nora bent over him, tears streaking through soot. "You built it, Elias," she whispered. "A real home." He exhaled one last time, and in that breath, the sound was not pain, but peace, like waves on a desert shore. When Moses and the townsfolk arrived, the fire had burned itself down to embers. The cabin still stood, charred, scarred, but unbroken. Nora sat beside Elias's body, her eyes fixed somewhere beyond the mountains. Reverend Boone knelt, removed his hat, and said quietly, "They say regret can't save a soul, but sometimes it builds a roof strong enough for others to live under." Nora said nothing. She took Elias's hat, hung it on the nail above the door, and whispered, "This house will remember you." Spring came late to Red Rock. The first rain fell on the red hills, washing away the smell of gunpowder that had haunted the air for months. On the ridge above the creek, Nora Lane's cabin still stood, charred in places, but upright. The new planks on the roof shone pale against the old ones, like scars that no one tried to hide. The day they buried Elias Turner, only a handful came. Moses, Reverend Boone, and May Cunningham. No hymns, no speeches. Just the wind whispering through the desert, laying a thin coat of red dust over a fresh grave. Boone bowed his head and murmured, "He built this house with guilty hands, but left it behind with a forgiven heart." Nora didn't cry. She simply stood there, still as stone. When the others rode away, she stayed, kneeling before a rough wooden cross that read, "Elias Turner." He stayed until the storm passed. She pressed her hand to his name, then turned back toward the cabin, the faint scent of burnt pine still lingering in the air. In the weeks that followed, Nora worked alone. She cut new beams, replaced the frames, fixed the roof. No one gossiped anymore. Fear of speaking ill about the dead had quieted every tongue. Reverend Boone came by sometimes, leaving a sack of flour without a word. May brought her seeds, saying tomatoes took kindly to this kind of soil. Then one dusty evening, a knock on the door. A boy stood there, thin, barefoot, clutching a mangy dog to his chest. "Ma'am, can I stay, just for the night?" Nora looked into his eyes, the same kind of eyes she once saw in the mirror years ago. She opened the door wide. "Come in, son. Everyone here's been lost once." From that night on, the cabin was no longer silent. There was laughter, small footsteps, the bark of a hungry dog, and the crackle of fire at dusk. Nora taught the boy to carve wood, to start a fire, to read from Elias's weathered Bible. Each night, before blowing out the lamp, she'd glance at the cowboy hat hanging on the wall and smile. Not because she'd forgotten, but because she'd learned how to remember without pain. A year passed. The cabin now had a garden, a henhouse, and a fence of cedar posts. People began calling it Turner's Rest, a stop for wanderers with nowhere to go. Travelers came, and Nora never turned anyone away. She didn't speak of Elias often, but when she did, she said, "There was a man once who taught me this, that silence can be a choice. But courage is the only prayer God ever hears." Every Sunday afternoon, Reverend Boone brought young folks out to see the place. He'd point to the cabin and tell them, "A man died here to protect a woman and a home. Not everyone gets saved, but if one man's death can make the world just a little softer, that's worth living for." By the second spring, wildflowers had grown along the creek. Nora sat on the porch, coffee steaming in her hands. The orphan boy was painting the window frames, humming a tune off-key. The wind carried the smell of fresh pine, and sunlight gleamed across the roof like a memory reborn. Nora looked up at the drifting clouds over the mountains and whispered, "Do you see it, Elias? The house still stands, and we're still here." In the amber light of evening, Reverend Boone's voice echoes like a benediction. He built it one log at a time, and she built the rest with her heart. Some homes are made of wood, others are made of the love we refuse to bury. If you've ever lost something you once thought you couldn't live without, and you're still out there trying to rebuild one day, one breath at a time, then remember this story. Because sometimes, strength isn't the hand that fires the gun, but the one that still lays down another piece of wood, even when the wind won't stop blowing. If the story of Elias and Nora found its way into your heart, leave a comment below. Tell us, what are you rebuilding little by little? And if you still believe that kindness and courage can survive out here, beneath these desert winds, hit like and subscribe. So when the fire of the Wild West burns again, you'll have a place by the flame, where lonely hearts meet and weary souls learn how to love once more.